This video is brought to you by MoviePalette.com and enter ROOM15 for 15% off of your palette. Hey horror fans, welcome back to 237, back with another review as I continue my run through of films based on real life serial killers. And this is another one that I don't own. This is one that I found on YouTube. And it's another made-for-TV movie. If you've been following this run-through, you know I've been a huge fan of these made-for-TV movies. Especially the ones that are like the first ones to be based on that killer. Usually to come out right on the cusp of their arrest or trial. And this came out just mere months, I think, after the arrest of this killer. And it's a very different one. I haven't done one like this. I guess technically you would call him a domestic terrorist because he did use bombs. But it would go on to become the most expensive case in American history up until that point in the mid-90s. But I think the reason why he's usually lumped in with serial killers rather than mass killers is because, you know, it spanned a number of years. It spanned almost 20 years that he was sending these bombs all over the place, killing 3 people, injuring 23 others. And these people were all at different locations at different times. So I'm guessing that's probably why he's listed under serial killers more than mass killers. But still, technically, he would be considered a domestic terrorist. That, of course, is the Unabomber, and this is the 1996 TV movie, Unabomber, The True Story. Now, of course, there are a slew of films based on or documentaries about the Unabomber. There's one that came out, I think, just last year called Ted K, which I wanted to check out. There's that film called The Net, which I think is just more about the technology that he was very against. In fact, I think I have a list of them here. I actually haven't seen any of them. I did want to see Ted K when that first came out. I have seen more documentaries about him. In fact, you know, he's been in every serial killer documentary that I have. He also has a Netflix documentary called Unabomber in His Own Words. Ted K. I thought it was going to give me a list of things actually based on him, but I guess not. But in any case, so this is the first film to be based on him, and again, came out the same year as his arrest. It was directed by John Purdy, written by John McGreevy, and one thing that caught my attention was its casting, because it really tells the story of the postal inspector that was following and trying to solve the Unabomber case, eventually joined the task force of the FBI. He's played by Dean Stockwell, who I do like as an actor. He's been in a bunch of things. He was in Blue Velvet. The year before this, he was in one of the worst TV movies or TV limited series that I've seen, The Langoliers. I think there's still a little bit of his deductional thinking acting in this, but he does much better in this. Robert Hayes as David Kaczynski, Ted Kaczynski's younger brother. And of course, Robert Hayes, Airplane. He was the lead in Airplane, which to me is the second funniest American comedy of all time. I love Airplane. So he plays the Unabomber's brother, David. And then I thought this was interesting, and I didn't even know this until I think I hit play, and then I just looked up a page about it and saw who was in it. But playing Kaczynski himself, even though he's not really in the film much, he does make the best of the scenes that he's in, especially that of his arrest. Tobin Bell as Ted Kaczynski. Yes, Jigsaw. Jigsaw plays the Unabomber, which I thought is really cool. It is good casting, And throughout the film, because it takes place between, I think, 79 and 96, it kind of skips the first two bombings, which was in 78. But when we first see him, he's still kind of got short hair, a mustache. And as the film goes on, he gets more scraggly looking. Up until by the end of the movie, he's got the big beard and the long hair, which they did do a good job at making him look that way. Again, he's not in the film much, which is fine, because it is more about the investigation. And actually, it's more about David than it is Ted, but still. I know there's another movie with Tobin Bell playing a serial killer. It's on that same playlist. But at one point, and I don't know if this was just a fan thing or if it was actually supposed to happen, but I read probably 10, 15 years ago that Tobin Bell was supposed to play Albert Fish. And of course, this was at the height of like the Saw movies. That would have been really cool. But I did enjoy seeing Tobin Bell play Ted Kaczynski. He doesn't get a whole lot of screen time, but I still thought he did a good job. Also, Victoria Mallory as Linda Kaczynski, David's wife. It was mostly filmed in Park City, Utah, and Salt Lake City, Utah, where some of these bombings actually took place. It's only 97 minutes. It is one of the shorter TV movies of this kind that I've seen. And it originally aired on the USA Network on September 11th, 1996. Which is kind of ominous to look back on it, that a movie about this domestic terrorist aired 5 years to the day of the worst terrorist attack. So 5 years prior. There's not much about the movie on this page, but you definitely could call this what I've been calling them a bullet point film, where every scene is literally something that happened. There's barely any filler. Each scene is either one of the bombings, one of the forward steps or developments in the case, something that you would read in the story of the Unabomber. There's only a couple scenes that might be for drama purposes or something, and for that reason I had to take a shit ton of notes, because literally every scene was something. And I know the last few films I've reviewed, I mentioned how there's like no dates or locations or anything. Almost every scene in this had text. There was more text in this movie than I've seen in a long time. But it is well made. It is decently enough acted. I thought Robert Hayes did a good job. Dean Stockwell, he's parts of his character, because he is playing an inspector instead of like a mystery crime writer like in Langoliers. He's kind of acting like Sherlock Holmes in Langoliers. There's still similar characters, and some of that cheesiness and terribleness from Langoliers is still present in Dean Stockwell's performance in this, but he does do a much better job. Tobin Bell is good as Kaczynski, especially at the very end during his arrest. You can just sort of see that vacant, just sort of lost look, even though you know he's highly, highly intelligent, which Kaczynski was. I would say this movie is fairly accurate. Again, I haven't seen the other films based on either Ted Kaczynski or the Unabomber himself. I have seen the Netflix documentary. That's really the only thing I've seen, other than documentaries like this, where it's a bunch of them. So I would say this movie's fairly accurate. I would say this is one where if you want to see a movie based on a serial killer that is factual, something that you can actually take away from it, instead of something like a Uwe Lamel or Andrew Jones film that's mostly dramatized and you can't tell the difference. Like, if you're not familiar with the case, this would be a good movie to pick up. Yeah, it does have a TV look to it. It does feel like a TV movie. It has the fade to blacks. It has the music. Kind of has that stylish look. And again, I'm not sure what this filter is called, but like a lot of scenes when there's the explosion, it'll freeze, go to black and white, but it looks super saturated. So like the darker colors like stick out more, and then you'll get text saying what happened to that person. Even then, there might be some slight deviations to like what happened to some of these victims. Like it might say this person lost some fingers, when in real life they lost their whole hand. But that's going to happen with any movie. You're always going to get slight changes. But I was surprised at how accurate this movie is. But then again, it's a TV movie. And these TV movies, again, I think the only one I could say that was lesser or not that good would have been Stranger Beside Me from 2003, which I was wondering if this was going to be as good as some other ones or be more like Stranger Beside Me because they're both USA films. But I would say this one was just as good as Hunt for BTK or I can't even remember some of the TV movies that I've done so far. But a lot of them I did end up liking. So, pretty solid movie. You really don't get any kind of backstory on Ted Kaczynski. The movie's kind of framed where we pick up with them going in for the arrest at his remote Montana cabin. But then just as he's about to open the door, that's when we cut. We cut back to 1978 with, I think it's the third bomb that he sent. And then we work forward. And it's kind of framed with every few scenes we'll kind of get up close of like a typewriter, the slow motion like tick, 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 with text on the screen. That's a sentence from Ted Kaczynski's 35,000 word manifesto that he sent to the Washington Post and it got published. So that's kind of a framing device. And also, whatever sentence comes up on the screen from the manifesto, that kind of lets you know what the next scene is going to be. It kind of helps set up the next scene. Like there's one line about, how to get our point across, we have to kill people. And then the next scene is the first fatality in the Unabomber bombs. It's not very graphic. I mean, there's one scene where a bomb goes off and we see a guy like with a bloody hand, but it usually goes to like black and white, freeze frame, and then we get text saying what happened, which is fine. I wasn't expecting this to be extremely gory or bloody. I'm sure some people are, even if it is a TV movie, and you are kind of dealing with terrorism as well. Some people might think, they post out, they didn't show any of the blood and guts blowing all over the place. It's a TV movie, dummy, in the 90s, so I don't think they're going to show that. But it's still stylized, it's still done well. Not really sure what else to say about it. This movie's very straightforward. It's only 97 minutes, but it did take me quite a while to watch it. Because every scene I had to pause it, go to my notes, type out what happens, and then put true or whatever, the true version of whatever they showed. And most of the time I already know what it is. Very seldomly will I have to go look it up, like, did that actually happen or is that the correct date? Very seldomly. But, with this, it is always of scenes that seems most noteworthy or ones that will move the plot forward and tell the story, not like he has dinner. I'm not going to do stuff like that. But where this movie is just every scene is pretty much like a bullet point of like a timeline. I guess you could actually call it a literal timeline movie. Every scene I had to like pause, type out, and I ended up taking a shit ton of notes. But I thought it was very good. If you're looking for accuracy, I would definitely recommend it. Um, if you want to see Tobin Bell, if you want to see Jigsaw's Ted Kaczynski, you might be a little disappointed because he's only in a handful of scenes. He's in it very seldomly. In fact, I would even say half of his scenes that he's in, he doesn't speak. He's just by himself. It will show him setting up or planting one of his bombs or whatever. So if you think he's going to be the main focus, you might be disappointed. So just know ahead of time going into that. It's pretty fast paced. It felt long for me because I had to keep taking notes, but it constantly keeps your interest. Every scene there's something that is trying to tell. Almost every scene has some sort of text, something informative on it. So if you're more educational rather than not caring if it's true or not, you just want to see something of that killer, which I'm not sure why anyone would. Like, I would always think you would want to watch these movies to learn about the real life killer, not just watch the movie for the sake of it. But if educational purposes are more your thing, then I have the feeling this would be the Unabomber movie to watch. Again, I don't know how accurate the other ones are. Ted K or The Net. I think there's another one called Unabomber. But I did want to see Ted K when that first came out. And also go watch Unabomber in his own words on Netflix. But other than that, there's not too much to say. I mean, it looks like a TV movie. It feels like a TV movie. But a well-made one, nonetheless. So I guess with that, we can just get into these cliff notes and then into the film itself, which, again, I had to take a lot of notes. So as always, I just like to give like a brief cliff notes or a brief summary of the killer that the film is based on. So Ted Kaczynski, aka the Unabomber, terrorized America between 1978 and 1995, killing 3 people and injuring 23 others, with homemade bombs that he either sent through mail or planted himself. He targeted people and places that he thought were advancing the human race to a more technological future, such as airlines and professors of genetics or universities in general. In 1995, he sent his 35,000-word manifesto, titled Industrial Society and Its Future, to several media outlets, with the Washington Post publishing it. By the time this was published, the FBI issued a $1 million award for the help of the capture of the Unabomber. The moniker derives from the case name Unabomb, abbreviating University and Airline Bomber. His younger brother David noticed the opinions and prose style of the manifesto and suspected his brother, informing the FBI. He was arrested at his isolated cabin outside Lincoln, Montana in 1996 and sentenced to 8 consecutive life sentences. Kaczynski was considered a mathematician prodigy, earning his master's and doctorate in 1964 and 1967, aged 22 and 25, respectively. And by the time he was 26, he was the assistant professor at the University of Michigan, teaching mathematics. He resigned in 1969 and moved out to the remote cabin in Montana in 1971, living off land and survival. The hunt for the Unabomber was the most expensive manhunt in American history at the time of his arrest, and his composite sketch of him wearing a hoodie and aviators had become one of the most recognizable and widely publicized sketches. And so now we come to the film itself, which, as I said, opens up with, beautiful shots of the mountainside of Montana, the streams, the mountains, trees, and then the FBI moving in on this cabin. Just as they call out, "Hello, is anyone in there?" We cut backwards. Which we cut back to, which also the opening montage credits shows a postage stamp of a politician. He would often use Eugene O'Neill $1 stamps. I couldn't remember the name of the stamp that they showed. But we get an on-screen quote. Almost everyone will agree that we live in a deeply troubled society. And then it will say the manifesto, paragraph, whatever. And this is from paragraph 5. So then on-screen text, commercial airline en route from Chicago, November 15th, 1979. A bomb goes off, the plane lands, says 12 people are hospitalized for smoke inhalation. True, and it was the third bomb that he sent. Then we see U.S. Postal Service in Washington, D.C. They get involved. They look at the bomb. They realize it had a faulty timing device, which is true. That's why it just smoked instead of exploding. And this was also the time when the FBI or law enforcement started to get involved. I think this is when the FBI got involved, but the task force didn't begin until 93. Which at that point we're introduced to Postal Inspector Ben Jeffries. He's the one played by Dean Stockwell. He's loosely based on Tony Muyat, who worked on 2 task forces to catch the Unabomber, which would be the original one at the postal investigation, I guess, and the actual FBI. Lombard, Illinois, 79. We're introduced to David Kaczynski. Shows him as a bus driver, says Ted is living in a cabin in Montana. True, he moved out there in 71 after resigning from Berkeley to live anonymously. I don't know if David was a bus driver. There's very little known about him, especially after Ted's arrest. He really vanished. He did one interview, then he really vanished. Then we go to Evanston, Illinois, November 79. It's mentioned 2 more bombs found in the Chicago area. One says found on May 25th of the previous year to the Chicago campus of Northwestern University. Were not recognized. It was given to a security officer who suffered a burnt hand, and they realized they're working with bombs that are simply homemade, that you can make them from any hardware store, any stuff you have in your garage, anywhere in America. They also realize clues that they think, oh, this guy wants us to think it's him, with these clues, like little initials or something underneath any timing devices or whatever. True. One was on the 25th of May, 79, which would have been the previous year, as stated. And the other one was May 9th of 79. Both sent to Northwestern University. The security guard did suffer burns. And as did the grad student of the second bomb. And he did put initials and clues in his bombs, but they were false. In fact, they compare him to the mad bomber George Metesky of the 40s and 50s, I think twice in this film. So then we get another manifesto quote. Our lives depend on decisions made by other people. Usually we do not know the people who make them. Paragraph 67. Home of United Airlines President Percy Wood in Lake Forest, Illinois, September 9th, 1980. He gets a book bomb, which we see is a copy of Sloan Wilson's Ice Brothers, which was a book that Ted Kaczynski turned into a bomb sent to Percy Wood. He opens it in his house, and then we get the text saying that he suffered lacerations to face, hands, and thigh. This was the first time I think I noticed something slightly off. I guess it was actually June 10th that this happened, not June 9th. And I read that he got burns and cuts over most of his body. But it was the right book that was turned into a bomb. They realized that the clues were false, compare him to the Mad Bomber. They come up with the name Unabomber based on the case name Unabomb, mixing university and airlines and bomber, which is true. That's how he did get the moniker. I'm not sure if it was as early as 1980, but more text. The system will be forced to use every practical means of controlling human behavior. Paragraph 150. A scene of Ted and David hunting and discussing lifestyles. This is sort of just expository of Ted talking about how he lives on 50 cents a day. He kills and eats the animals he hunts, or the fish, or the berries. He lives off the land. He has no electricity or running water. And David says no way he could possibly do that. Really just sort of a character expository scene. University of Utah at Salt Lake City. This is one where we see Ted planting it himself on the steps of the building. October 8th of 81. Left on steps of the campus, and then we jump, which we see someone walk up to it, kind of lift it. No, it looks weird. Scream, bomb, everyone runs. Where in real life it was left in the hallway of the school, and I think campus security found it, and they were able to just disarm it. Which we then jump 6 months later. We say that the bomb was disarmed. No one was hurt. This was the first one to be disarmed. Then we jump to the University of Berkeley in California, or the University of California, Berkeley. June 2nd of 82. Bomb left in cafeteria and ignited when handle lifted. It was actually sent in July. That's what I always read. And Professor, I did not know how to pronounce this guy's name, Diogenes Angelikos, suffered severe injuries to hand and arms. That's the text that comes up. Also, we see a note that reads, W-U, woo, it works. I told you it would, RV. Which, that one was, I believe that note was actually on the previous bomb that was disarmed. Inspectors say it's been quiet for 3 years, and they speculate why. Like, did he blow himself up? Dean Stockwell says no, he's too smart, too careful. Did he get caught for another crime? Did he die? No one knows. He did send 2 in 82 and then return in 85, so that's 3 years. They got that right. Jeffries, Dean Stockwell, mentions how he hates technology, and that has to be what the bulk of his bombings are for, because he's sending them to universities with sort of technological programs. We jump to Terlingua Ranch, West Texas, 83. It shows David living down there in a tent, trying to live like Ted. Again, I don't know if he did that. Then we jump back to Berkeley again, May 15th of 85. Package explodes in a computer lab, and it says John Hauser's right arm, badly mutilated, loses 4 fingers, and impaired vision in one eye. True. He was a grad student, and I guess he also had a severed artery in that arm. Jeffries goes to speak with Hauser at the hospital, but he doesn't remember anything. More manifesto. In order to get our message before the public, we've had to kill people. Paragraph 96. So then it shows the first fatality. Sacramento, December 15th of 85. There's a nail and splinter bomb out in a parking lot, made to look like a block of wood, nails sticking out of it, but when you picked it up, it would explode and shrapnel would go everywhere. It shows someone doing that, and when it explodes, Hugh Scruton killed by a shrapnel that pierced his heart. True. It was the 4th bomb sent in 1985, the 11th overall bomb, and the first fatality. And also, again, every time there's an explosion, you'll hear the noise, but it'll freeze sort of slow motion, then freeze frame, black and white. The guy in the the computer lab, I think, is the only scene where we actually see an explosion and the aftermath, with his hand all bloody and mutilated. We jump to 14 months later, another nail bomb placed under a car. This pedestrian notices, goes to move it because it's under a car. Again, it looks like a block of wood with nails, so he goes to move it. It explodes, and it says Gary Wright suffers severe lacerations to face, arms, and legs. And again, this was in Salt Lake City, Utah. It was February 20th, 87, so that would be 14 months. He suffered from 200 pieces of shrapnel. Also, the film shows across the street these two women in a building, I don't know if it was a salon or something, notice a guy putting this bomb under a car. We see him from a distance, and he was wearing a gray hoodie, with the hood up. And so I was wondering, are they gonna, is this gonna be where the sketch comes from? Which, of course, is probably one of the most famous composite sketches ever. And it is. It was that bombing that led to the first, and those witnesses, leading to the first composite sketch of the Unabomber, which is actually this one. I don't think it's the one that most people would think of when they think of the Unabomber. That's the one that came out after the $1 million reward came out. But this was the first one. And yeah, that was in 87. It doesn't show this one in the movie. It looks like someone, an original drawing for the film. But all the ones we see in the film are the ones from 93. Shows them with the first sketch. They also say, since it's a computer store, it must be him, as they know he hates technology. Also, it shows them with the sketch that I believe was released in the 90s after the $1 million reward went out in October of 83. Yeah, it shows them in their office. They have that 90s sketch as well. Schenectady, New York, if I pronounce that correctly. Summer 1990, David and Linda's wedding. Ted was not there. Manifesto. The modern man has never had a practical use for his body beyond walking from his car to his house. Paragraph 75. Shows Ted on his bike, which was really his only mode of transportation. February 92, 6 years later, and no bombings reported. So this earlier task force is disbanded. I do believe that happened, but the task force on the FBI level didn't even start till 93. So we jump to Charles Epstein, USF professor of genetics, Tiburon, California. This is April 22nd, 93. Checks his mail, bomb ignites, suffers severe internal injuries, loss of fingers, and impaired hearing. True, he lost 3 fingers, and it was actually June 22nd. And apparently he was in his kitchen, not in the patio. And then literally the very next scene is Dr. Galertner, if I pronounce that correctly, at Yale. It even says 2 days later. So technically this would be the 24th. Checks his mail, bomb goes off. Text says David Galertner suffers critical internal injuries, loss of fingers, and severe vision impairment in one eye. I guess he actually lost his whole right hand in real life. Postal investigation receives letters. They talk about it. There was so many scenes that I thought, oh, is this the manifesto? Because they keep making it sound like it. All the people in this room are talking about how all these media outlets got it, and that he'll cease his terrorism if it's published. So I kept thinking it's the manifesto, but the manifesto doesn't come till way later in the film, so I guess these are just letters. But in any case, I meant to put this further down in my notes, but yeah, in 1995, Ted mailed several media outlets to print his 35,000 word manifesto, entitled Industrial Society and Its Future, saying he'll desist all terrorism if it's published. There was a bunch of controversy about negotiating with terrorists. But eventually, Attorney General Janet Reno and FBI Director Louis Freeh suggested that it be published out of safety, and it was in September 95. So no, this scene is not the manifesto. That comes later, but that's the backstory behind it. Jeffries offered to join the task force and made senior man. It was formed in 93, but the leader was a guy named James Fitzgerald. They have a suspect in custody. I couldn't find anything. I don't remember that happening in real life. Jeffries briefs the Postal Service on Unabomber type packages. I imagine a lot of places did that. Thomas Mosser, executive, North Caldwell, New Jersey, on December 10th of 94. He arrives home. He notices a package. He asks who it's from. His wife says he doesn't know. His two daughters are also home. He goes to open. It blows up. And it says Thomas Mosser is decapitated and body riddled with razor blades and nails. He was at his home and he was killed, obviously. And Kaczynski would later say he sent it to him because he tried to repair the image of Exxon after the Exxon and Valdez oil spill. And his family was present, including his 13-year-old daughter and his 15-month-old daughter. They were just, like, in the next room of this explosion. Word Manifesto, reform is insufficient and revolution is required, paragraph 86. And then more again, dump the whole stinking system and take the consequences, paragraph 179. California Forestry Association, Sacramento, California, April 25th, 95. Mail for a president of this place, like a lumber lobbying place, timber lobbying company. Excuse me. It was supposed to be for this president that retired, so no one knows whether they should open it. So the current president decides to open it, Gilbert Murray. It explodes off screen and we freeze frame on someone else's reaction. It says Gilbert Murray killed instantly by the Unabomber's most powerful bomb. Miraculously, no one else was injured. This would also be his final bomb. And though he did send a geneticist named Philip Sharp a threatening letter after this, but this was the last bomb that he sent. More letters said, they mentioned some of the media outlets that received, this was another scene that I thought was a manifesto, but letters saying that a airline will be targeted in 6 days. So then we see actual news footage of the LA International Airport of September 29th of 96, when, pretty much on lockdown. That should say 95. That was supposed to say 95. Airport is evacuated. They realize there's nothing there. True. Linda proposes that David that Ted could be the Unabomber, based on just the profile that they released. They did release the profile so that people could help if it sounded familiar. Timeline of certain events like the bombs in Salt Lake City and stuff, like Ted was there when they happened. David's a bit reluctant, but says he'll think about it. July 28th, 95, the manifesto is received by the Post and the Times and handed over to the task force. True, but they call it 37,000 word. It was 35,000. On September 19th, 95, the Post publishes the manifesto. True. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. Paragraph 1 of the manifesto. David reads it and starts to suspect Ted. True, which as in the film, he notices certain phrases, thoughts, the prose style, opinions, and starts to think it's Ted. David informs someone of his suspicions. True. Word Manifesto, modern man has the sense largely justified that change is imposed on him. Paragraph 57. Jeffries goes to talk to previous victims, but they don't remember anything. David gives letters to someone on the task force to test the handwriting. I think that's true. I think that was how David was able to confirm that it was his brother. Handwriting matches, and David gives the task force his address. I do believe that's true. Ted gets arrested at his home. True. They did do a good job with his hair and his beard. Again, as I said, as the movie goes on, he gets a bigger beard, crazier hair, and they give him the black T-shirt, the dirty jeans, the filthy red, white, and blue windbreaker that we see when he got arrested. Unfortunately, they didn't recreate any of the news footage of them carrying him down the street looking all filthy and homeless. We really only see him at the cabin being arrested. But still, that short that short scene, they did do a good job with it. So then we just get end text. The 18-year hunt for the Unabomber was the costliest case U.S. law enforcers have ever faced. It ended in the arrest of Theodore Kaczynski, who then was put under 24-hour watch in Sacramento jail until his trial in 1997. Over 700 pieces of evidence were recovered from his cabin. True, I do believe that. This is like the longest series of end text that I've seen for a movie, probably yet, because it goes through each victim almost. Percy Wood continued in his capacity as president of United Airlines, now retired in Florida. True. Diogenes Angelikos is professor of emeritus at the Berkeley School in California. His office is still down the hall from the Hauser bombing. True. Hauser teaches at the University of Colorado in Boulder. He still continues to fly planes, but not the high-performance jets that he once had a passion for. True. Gary Wright travels internationally for a software company in Utah. He hopes for better counseling for bombing victims. Charles Epstein continues to teach at the University of San Francisco. Was once a world-class cellist, but could no longer play after the bombing. And again, this is all to focus more on the victims rather than the killer himself, which is kind of the whole point of the whole movie. It focuses more on the investigator and the victims rather than the killer himself. So he couldn't play cello anymore. Scruton was the first Unabomber fatality victim and the youngest at age 38. Thomas Monster's widow must cope with the raising two daughters alone. Gilbert Murray's son refused acceptance to Cornell to stay with his mother in Sacramento. Ben Jeffries is largely based on Tony Bouillat. At his retirement, he was presented with the handcuffs Kaczynski was arrested in, which that is true, and I knew that before this. I was wondering if that was going to be in the film. It wasn't, but at least it's mentioned. Other than the single interview in the New York Times, David has stayed silent about his life and brother. He and his wife have refused profit from the story. True. On May 4th, 1998, Theodore Kaczynski was formally sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms plus 30 years. Apparently he got 8. I meant to look up, again, I don't know if he got life terms after the deaths of some of his victims in later years, but I do know he got 8 consecutive life sentences. And then end credits in the background show photos of his diagrams of his bombs and pictures of like wreckage, debris, stuff like that, rubble and evidence. So that's Unabomber, the True Story, the 96 TV movie, which again came out only mere months after his arrest. But again, the story took America by storm for a number of years, especially in the 90s, when, I remember seeing things on TV about, around 93 with that sketch on TV, just everyone going crazy. Definitely one of the biggest sketches ever to be put out. I can definitely see why it was the most costliest case that they've had at that time. But it's still a well-made film. I mean, it's very factual. It's very bullet point. It's very timeline. Very little dramatization in like an embellishment or a fictional sense. It's very, I don't want to say by the numbers or by the books, but it has this very encyclopedic feel where it's just scene by scene giving you all the timeline events of this case from the second bombing all the way up to his arrest. It does skip some bombings here and there, but it shows all 3 deaths. It shows the one disarmed one. I would have liked to see more Tobin Bell in it, even if it was just him in his cabin. It just would have been cool to see him more. But this is yet another case of a TV movie that is more accurate, better made than a bunch of other serial killer films that I've seen. And again, yes, technically he is a domestic terrorist, but I can see why he would fit in the world of serial killers more than I can mass murderers. So I wasn't sure what to feel about this film. I was kind of thinking it was going to be more the level of Stranger Beside Me. But I would say this is one of the better ones as well. I thought this one was very good. So I'm not sure what ones I'll be doing next. Again, I don't have any Christmas films planned. So I'm just going to play it by ear. Probably continue these serial killer films because I'm enjoying doing them. So stay tuned for whatever's next. And thank you for watching.